Thanks for joining me today. This is Laura Lynn with KeepInkingUp.com. I'm an independent demonstrator for Stampin' Up! In San Antonio, Texas. And today I wanted to share a card that uses heat embossing. Heat embossing is a great way to add a touch of elegance to any project. So what you need to do heat embossing is embossing powder. Today we're going to be using gold, but we also have silver, copper, clear, white, and black. So you can do multiple or different colors, but today we're going to be using gold. You'll need an embossing buddy. An embossing buddy is basically this little bag full of a powder, and when you wipe it across your cardstock, it removes excess static and oils maybe from your fingers to help prevent the powder from sticking where you don't want it. So I've had my embossing powder for nearly 18 years. It's still quite full of powder, so it'll last me another 5 or 10 more years. So it's not something that you will use through very quickly. You'll also need a Versamark ink pad. This is a sticky clear ink. It stays sticky long enough for you to put the embossing powder over your stamped image. And then of course you'll need a heat tool. Our heat tool actually has two settings. The first setting is to dry things, like if you were doing watercolor, you could speed the drying process up a little bit. The second speed is the hotter speed, or the hotter temperature, which you need to use for heating up the embossing powder. A lot of times I get asked, can you use a hair dryer? And I'm sorry, but the hair dryer does not quite get hot enough. It blows hot air, but the air itself isn't hot enough to actually melt the powder. So you do need some form of a heat tool, and our heat tool is fabulous, and I highly recommend it. So let me put these aside for a second, and we'll get out our card pieces. For today's card, I'm using Mossy Meadow card base, so this is 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and it's scored at 5 1/2. So I'm going to fold that and burnish it with my bone folder so my card base lays nice and flat. Then I also have a piece of our gold foil paper because we're using gold embossing powder, and this piece is cut at 4 by 5 1/4, so that's going to layer onto our card base like that. So I'll set that aside. The next piece is 3 3/4 by 5. This is another piece of Mossy Meadow cardstock, and I actually already have a piece where I've cut a decorative edge on the bottom. I forgot to mention that for today's card, for today's card, we're going to be using the stamp set Good Morning Magnolia, which is coming out in the 2019-2020 annual catalog, which goes live June 4th. This stamp set also has a coordinating set of dies, which I used this die to cut that piece to give a decorative edge. When you purchase a bundle, of course, you save 10%, so I always recommend that. This is a double stamp set. I put them in the same case, so I have all of the stamps in the same case just to save on a little bit of storage space. So I'm not using this layer. We're going to actually stamp on this layer that has the decorative edge cut. So let me make some room here. I need to get my Stamparatus. I've been making several of these cards, so I already have the stamps set up in my Stamparatus because of course it's wonderful for doing multiples. So I'm going to sit my piece of cardstock with a decorative edge in the corner of my Stamparatus with the decorative edge down here. I'll put my magnet there just to keep it in place. Oh, before I get started, I'm going to wipe my embossing buddy over my cardstock. I sometimes forget to do this, and I always regret it. So you just kind of wipe it over there. Sometimes there's a little bit of powder showing. It's okay. It'll come off later. And then I need to use my Versamark ink pad, and I'm going to, I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to ink up my sentiment and stamp that down. Okay. And now I'm going to, use the grid lines on my Stamparatus, and I'm going to place this piece 3/4 of an inch away from the top and from the side because I want my floral image, this giant magnolia stamp, I want it to come off the page a little bit. So I will go ahead and do the same thing that I did before. And remember this Versamark ink stays sticky for quite a while to give me time to do this stamping. So I'm going to stamp this down. Okay, I think I'm going to do that again because I think the center doesn't look like it's fully inked. That's the beauty of the Stamparatus. I can do this again. Get more ink on there. That looks better. Okay. And now I'm going to pull in a coffee filter to catch my excess powder when I pour it over my stamped image. So I'm going to start with the thanks down there. Tap off the excess, and now I'm going to sprinkle the powder over all of the flower. Looks like I missed a little piece there. I think I got it all covered. That looks pretty good. Now I can just use this coffee filter to pour this back into the pot so I can use that powder later. And I just reuse this coffee filter over and over for whichever embossing powder I'm using. So I just keep that with that as I go. I'm going to wipe all this extra powder off my thing there. Okay, and now I'm ready to heat set this. Let me put this Stamparatus aside, and now I'm going to go ahead and heat up my heat tool. And this is where the magic happens. You're going to see after it heats up a little bit, I'll run it over the paper. I'm going to keep it moving. And then we'll see the embossing powder turn shiny, because right now it's dull. It's just the powder. So keep your heat tool moving because you don't want to burn your paper. If you hold it in one spot too long, you might burn your paper. You can see it changing. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? Changing. Isn't that pretty? This gold on the mossy meadow is so pretty. I haven't tried it yet on this color. And you just move your heat tool all around until you get all of it nice and shiny. Just takes a couple of minutes, but it's well worth it, I think, because this is just gorgeous. Talk about elegant. This is just a beautiful thank you card. Okay. Isn't that gorgeous? I love that large magnolia image, and then in the gold embossing. Oh my goodness, that's just so beautiful. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and wipe all this extra powder off, so we don't have any white powder from the embossing buddy left. That is just so pretty. Okay, so now we're going to, I forgot to bring my glue over here. I'm going to add glue to the back side of my embossed piece. I'm running out of glue. I hope I have enough here. Looks like I will. And I'm going to center that on my piece of gold foil. Well, I'm going to make the same border around the top because I cut the bottom. The embossing the heating of the paper when you're melting the embossing powder does make the paper warp a little bit. So you need to kind of really press hard to make sure it goes nice and flat. I think that looks good. And now I'm going to turn that over and add Stampin' Dimensionals. I'll put one in each corner, and then two in the middle so it won't sag. And then I take these paper backings off. I don't have any fingernails, so sometimes it's hard for me to get these off. And then we will place that on our card base. Make sure it's going the right way. I don't want to put it upside down. I've done that before. So we'll place that right there. And look, isn't that a gorgeous card? Oh, it's so pretty. That could be a nice thank you card for wedding gifts or something. Oh my goodness, it's so pretty. I do want to share another example that I did. Like I said, I've been making a few of these. This one I did on crumb cake with gold, and then I painted the flower in with a little bit of our Whisper White craft ink. Isn't that pretty too? Very different, but both very elegant. So anyway, I hope you found this video helpful on doing heat embossing, and I hope that you give it a try because it really is pretty. Okay, thanks so much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.